Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cracking Addiction. My name is Fergal Armstrong, and today we have a very special guest, Zappy Zappalin. Now, Zappy is the founder of the Mind Army and describes himself as the psychedelic concierge to the stars. So, a big welcome to you today, Zappy. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm here in Florida and just excited. I'm being a road warrior today. I'm in the car, but this battle for, in this case, Ibogaine for addiction, you
Yeah,
got to be talking to politicians, businesses.
yeah.
You really got to be out on the road educating.
You've got to
So
be
that's
out.
where I'm at.
Right. So, before we touch on Ibogaine, I just want some context. I suppose all of this started with legislation that Richard Nixon signed in the 70s. What did he do?
Well, in that time of civil unrest in Vietnam, at the time before that, the psychedelic medicines and a lot of these compounds were legal. They were actually being used by psychiatrists, were using LSD, and all these different things were happening. But when Nixon realized that people were, free thinking too much and were not going to want to go to war if they had access to some of these compounds that allow you to break through the sort of normal everyday thinking, that it was not good for the war effort. And they made all of the psychedelics illegal. They put them on Schedule 1 in 1971. They did the Controlled Substances Act. So to be on Schedule 1, it means it has no medical benefit and a high chance for addiction,
Yeah.
which is, of course,
So
absurd.
no medical benefit.
Yeah, no medical
And
benefit.
yet, no medical benefit. And yet, science now has realized that there is medical benefit.
Yep. And
Yeah.
I would add, Fergal, that anybody who's had psychedelic experiences and used these compounds knows that they are some of the least addictive compounds in the whole world.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think, these were improperly scheduled, specifically, and we'll go into this with Ibogaine, but that one was put on the schedule when it was already deemed safe. And so that one really shouldn't, or non-addictive, I should say. And so it really shouldn't be on there at all. That was a
Right.
mistake.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're paying for it right now as a society as we're in this addiction crisis.
So, tell me about the Mind Army. What was the impetus for founding the Mind Army? You're the founder of it. What was going through your head at the time? Why was your soul burning?
Yeah, well, I wound up doing plant medicine, some ayahuasca down in the jungle with Michelle Rodriguez, the actress from Fast and Furious. We put a movie together about it. And when I came back, I started ranting to everybody about, you have to go do these things and go inside your own mind. And people were waiting for them to be legal and getting a lot of pressure from their families or, the medical establishment not, having the education about these things. And so I realized that in order to get these compounds into the hands of people, it was really going to take a very concerted effort to get them legalized and off of this Schedule 1. And so the Mind Army is a nonprofit, it's a social movement, and we're fighting for the right to pursue happiness. And we believe that it's your inalienable right to go inside your own mind for answers and healing. And in 2024, we're not going to sit here as an organization and have people tell us, okay, alcohol's good, tobacco's good, but somehow psilocybin mushrooms are bad, or ibogaine, you can't access it because we just don't accept that, and we're telling people not to accept it, to get educated, and they have the right, the inalienable right to as a human being to explore. And in the United States, we're specifically encouraged to explore the new world, explore space, under the ocean, but somehow you're not allowed to explore inside your own mind. And the Mind Army just, we're fighting against that. We want these compounds available for the crisis of mental health and addiction that we're facing in 2024 following the pandemic We can't play
Hmm.
games anymore.
So let's just be clear. Your mind army wants to, at the very least, decriminalize the use of serotonergic hallucinogens, including what, ayahuasca,
Um,
mescaline.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see all of these naturally occurring plants that we've know are safe if you do them in the right set and setting and have huge medical value to be available to people because they each have their own, distinct possibility with as a medicine to heal something different. Somebody might need one thing versus the other, but we have to if right now they're on schedule 1 so they can't even be studied and we need these taken off of schedule 1 so that they can be studied and we can really look at what the different opportunities are, what the levels should be, and maybe even who shouldn't be having certain medications. So, for that reason, I'm really advocating right now that we have to just demand our right based on, the addiction crisis, which a lot of it happened, during COVID. A lot of people, came into their addictions in that time or created a new addiction. And the current and previous ways of getting rid of that, abstinence, talk therapy, these kind of things, going to meetings, it's just not going to cut it when it comes to fentanyl and crack and meth and these things that are very overpowering that need a powerful antidote that people are of course understanding that we can't go back to our pre-COVID times and try to you know get through this addiction crisis like we did before that. We need new opportunities, new breakthrough technologies to do this. And the only way I've ever seen somebody break an addiction overnight is a major breakthrough that takes them back to their kind of original frequency and allows them to get rid of the traumas and things because most addictions are just people trying to cover up traumas using whatever means they have at their disposal.
Right. So we're talking about ibogaine here, right? So first of all, can you explain what ibogaine is and where is it in in terms of its cultural context?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Ibogaine is an African root. So they basically scrape the bark of the root, and that bark they make into sort of a powdered form that you could swallow. And it dates back millennia to a tribe in Western Africa called the Bwiti. And the Bwiti have been using iboga, for thousands and tens of thousands of years. They use it to commune with their ancestors who've passed to get answers from them. And um, so what's happened is that there's iboga, which is this root, and if you isolate the alkaloids in that's the compound that is effective in treating addiction. If you take the alkaloids, you can just kind of take all the alkaloids and make it into what's called ibogaine, which is like taking out a lot of that plant material and things. So rather than having to swallow, 20 or 30 iboga pills of bark, they've isolated the alkaloid and you can take one Ibogaine pill, which is an incredible experience. Like I said, the Bwiti use it to get in touch with their ancestors. You're going to have a 12-hour or so experience, very deep, looking at your past, maybe even looking into your DNA. Maybe it's your great 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 grandfather's, you know, thing that's hung up within you that you need to break free of. And ibogaine is actually capable of breaking the patterns that you have, those, sort of habitual patterns of the mind that people get, from addiction or from trauma, where they just keep cycling through these very negative cycles. And the ibogaine, is resetting your entire brain. According to science, it wipes your prefrontal cortex. So it's actually, when you come out of your experience, you have no more cravings for anything. So it really gives you like this window of a matter of months where you're not going to have those cravings. You're going to be able to change your lifestyle. And since you're resonating at this really, your kind of original frequency and you're feeling really good physically and mentally, you have this opportunity to change your lifestyle and be, sober for the rest of your life. And so most people only do Ibogaine once. Some people need to do it a few times, but each time you're doing it, like the Bwiti, you're unpeeling these layers and getting rid of, these traumas, which in addiction, it's usually, one or two major traumas or things that have happened or some, broken patterns in the brain that just need to be rebuilt. And we have this incredible natural safe compound. And I just want to make the point, Virgil, that this compound was sold over the counter by a French company. Ibogaine was in the 1950s for, energy and virility. And so it was proven safe. So it really, of all these compounds, it's the one that should not be on the Schedule 1, which is the no medical benefit possibility of addiction, proven not to be addictive. And so we got to help this one.
Let me just summarize this. So, Ibogaine comes from the Iboga root, and that was used by the Bwiti people in Africa to connect with their ancestors. Right. So that was the cultural context, but it's now being used more recently as a way of switching people's brains from being dependent on a substance to being not dependent on a substance. So it kind of resets people, and they suddenly wake up after an experience, maybe 12 hours, that they don't feel as if they've ever were addicted in the first place. And it's been used to treat, or people have used it to self-medicate for heroin addiction, for instance, quite successfully. Why then? So that's the benefit. So that's the cultural context, and that's the benefit. Why then have people started reporting adverse effects with ibogaine?
Well, that's interesting because, the statistics are that in the last 50 years, something like 50 people have died having ibogaine. And so, and again, when you do the ibogaine, you're supposed to do it in an assisted way because it can be cardio. It brings your heart rate down. So it's very important that you know you do it in the proper set and setting. But if you really think about it, and most of those deaths, I just want to tell you, most of those deaths, the people came to break an addiction. They wound up sneaking some heroin or something in. They took the heroin, and then a few hours later, they were given the ibogaine, and they died, and they called it a cause of death ibogaine. So when I look at thousands of people dying from opiates, in this country, hundreds of thousands of people, and I compare it to alcohol and suicide and veteran suicides, and I look at, okay, here's 50 people in 50 years of the thousands and thousands that have done it have died. Well, that makes it one of the safest compounds that there is, number one. And number two, I've been told that since the 1960s, the time that you reference um, with Richard Nixon and that administration, it was really the alcohol companies that were fueling all of this negative propaganda against psychedelic medicines, including ibogaine, because they knew that one day, like 2024 would come, where society was moving away from alcohol because they could use, maybe psilocybin mushrooms, maybe, cannabis, and that, you know, the people who are alcoholics who are like their power users, they didn't want these people all of a sudden getting, not addicted anymore. And they were the ones that were fueling the negative propaganda. It was really on the alcohol companies there. So I think if you look back, you would say, okay, well, if it was proven safe so a French company could sell it over the counter, and then only 50 people have died out of tens of thousands that have done it, in taken it in their own hands and done it in these settings. that's really safe. I think we have to, when you measure it up against antidepressants and alcohol and cocaine use that people are doing to try to treat their traumas, I would say Ibogaine's much safer and much more effective if they really want to, not be beholden to some substance, that they want to be able
Mm,
to be in control of their
right.
own, nervous system.
So, so your argument then regarding the use of ibogaine is that it actually saves more people than it harms. Yeah,
But yeah, exponential
right.
numbers. Yeah.
But it does. You acknowledge then it does cause harm in terms of deaths from heart attacks and deaths from electrolyte disturbances and
Um,
dehydration.
the only reason I would refute what you're saying right there is I think if we in the future are able to um, study these compounds, then just like a
Yeah,
peanut allergy, there's
yeah,
2,500 people a year shouldn't have peanuts. Well, if we knew and we could test people for ibogaine allergy or mushroom allergy, we would find that we'd probably be very close to no fatalities with these compounds. It's sort of the ignorance of them being, behind the scenes, and you having to not know whether you have an allergy or something like that. I think that's it. But, comparatively, you got 30, 40 veterans in the United States committing suicide every day. I mean, that's if they were to do ibogaine, I believe that number would probably be 3 or 4 would commit suicide, a day if the veterans were able to access this. Because to get rid of trauma means you don't have to cover up your life with, substances and numbing agents to try to get you to forget. You could actually live your life, in a very positive way. So I think you got to get to the root of it. Ibogaine gets to the root of it, and like a peanut allergy, there's a bunch of people that should not have it, but we have to, come up with testing for that so that it can be even safer.
so, Zappi, I'm speaking to you from Australia, and so we need to acknowledge the Australian context. Now, as far as I'm aware, ibogaine is a Schedule 4 drug according to the TGA, which means it cannot be imported or administered without a license granted by the TGA. So, effectively, its access in Australia is very limited. And the other point to make is that certainly the use of ibogaine to manage addiction in Australia is not mainstream by any means, and is certainly not supported by the vast majority of addiction medicine specialists. So, for people to actually access ibogaine treatment, they have to go abroad. And the final thing I want to say is that I am aware of cases where doctors have been struck off for facilitating the use of ibogaine for patients who have unfortunately died. So we need to understand that context as
Uh,
well as your
yeah.
context.
I'm going to say, I understand. I think in New Zealand and ibogaine is legal or not illegal. And in Australia, with the new psychedelic legislation that they put through, I know, some of those compounds are coming online now, but ibogaine, really has to be at the top of the list. I know Australia is a super high conscious place where the government is in charge of helping you to be healthy. So they actually want you to get better, not like here in the States where the insurance companies and these guys are, doing their thing with the treatment centers and, relapsing and going back 3 or 4 times. Like the government, it's in their interest in Australia to keep you healthy. So that I think it's very smart of the government to have legalized psychedelics and put those into the system. I think, you know, 50 years from now, that's going to be recognized as a brilliant thing that they did at this time that probably, the United States and other places will follow suit, when they see the numbers back from Australia. So I think, we got to, like I was going to say this, sometimes, let's say there's, 50 total deaths. Uh, if you notice, the definition of a Schedule 1 is no medical benefit and high addiction possibility. But you notice that cigarettes are not on Schedule 1, and they have no medical benefit and they're killing millions of people. So that says to me that entirely everything we're talking about is just a political and financial game, because otherwise cigarettes would be on Schedule 1.
Yeah, I agree. There is a certain hypocrisy in that, isn't there? And so too with alcohol. I mean, if alcohol was a compound discovered today, I very much doubt that it would get past national and international legislation.
Yeah,
What's the
no,
medical benefit
probably.
of alcohol? Yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's certainly
some
addictive.
people might argue and they say, oh, there's some medical, but come on, give me one medical benefit for a cigarette that you can
Yeah,
come up with. And then
yeah,
when you go to the store here in the United States, there's a sign that says something like 2,500 people die every day from smoking related illness. They have to say that on a sign right over the cigarette
yeah,
display. And it's like,
yeah.
well, if that's not on Schedule 1, then the whole thing is frankly bullshit. And the
Mm.
Mind Army is just saying to you, whether you got to, you know, like get yourself in the right set and setting, be with professionals, but by all means, do not follow the standard protocol if you're trying to get sober. Because,
Yeah.
you know, what I would say, Fergal, what I watch with friends of mine who struggle with addiction in the past, um, when they're doing, going to meetings every day and they're telling me I'm sober, and I go to the meeting with them to support them, and I watch, and they're, drinking 6 cups of coffee with 10 sugars in them, and they're, smoking a vape and all this stuff, and they're like, oh, I got to go to a meeting in 2 hours so I don't use. And I'm like, that's not sober. That's not a way to live. That's not a life. Why don't you just go do Ibogaine, this natural plant, in the right set and setting, and break that and not be beholden to that addiction as what your life is about, and just move forward in an unencumbered way? That sounds much better than going through the detox. And it seems like a no-brainer to me.
So, Zappi, I appreciate you are a passionate advocate for Ibogaine, but I think we do have to acknowledge there are medical legal issues around here, and certainly there is a risk of death. But as you rightly point out, so too is there a risk of death with cigarettes and alcohol. But on that note, we're going to have to wrap things up. But I want to thank you for your time and your passion today. So, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you. And I would say if anybody wants to learn more about it, I've got 2 documentary films that both deal with addiction and Ibogaine. I have The Reality of Truth with Michelle Rodriguez, the actress, and another with Lamar Odom, the basketball player Kardashian, called Lamar Odom Reborn. And those are both on Amazon Prime, YouTube, and check them out. You can actually see somebody going through the treatment and have more reference points of doctors and statistics and things like that, and see somebody get their life turned around. Because I just want to point out the statistic. Lamar Odom did Ibogaine 5 years ago for his addiction, and it's been 5 years, and he's told me hasn't used any drugs, and he just doesn't have any desire to do it. So that's about as good as he can get.
All right. Okay, Zappi, thanks very much.
Thank you. Peace.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.